Hey guys, it's Brother Scott with the Potter's House, and this is the first teaching in our Fingerprints of Yah video, or some Fingerprints of God teachings that we're going to be doing and working on this year. And hopefully these will be helpful to you. If you are familiar with Hebrew roots, or in that movement, or what we call apostolic roots, then you're going to be familiar with a lot of stuff that we will discuss in these video teachings. And these teachings are kind of geared not to uh, maybe a college level, or a, for lack of a better word, veteran of Hebrew roots, apostolic roots, but more of a geared to maybe someone who is interested in learning or wants to learn more about these things. And so, as we get started, um, I guess the best place to start, the first place to start in discovering the fingerprints of Yahweh, would be in Genesis. And many of you will be familiar with the scripture that we're going to be reading here in Genesis. Genesis 1:14 says, and we're going to be using the King James. People are probably more familiar with the King James. It's kind of a universal version. And this way also someone can't come along later and say, well, that's not what the King James says. So we're going to use the King James, and from time to time we'll use other ones along with it. The ones I prefer would be the English Standard Version, and I also like the Complete Jewish Bible. But let's look at in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 14. It says, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Now I want to pull out a couple of words out of this verse. The first one being the word signs. The Hebrew for this word is ot. It's a masculine noun meaning sign or signal or mark. So we want to remember this is what the word means. Ot means sign, signal, or mark. And it does have a Greek equivalent, semeion, spelled S-E-M-E-I-O-N. This word also means sign or mark. It also means miracles which lead to something out of and beyond themselves. This is something I want you to remember. Let me read that again. It means miracles which lead to something out of and beyond themselves. And here's where we got the title for our series. It also means finger marks of God. Finger marks of God. We're calling them fingerprints of Yahweh. Valuable not so much for what they are as for what they indicate. I want to bring that to you again. It's miracles that lead to something out of and beyond themselves, finger marks of God, valuable not so much for what they are, but for what they indicate. So one of the reasons that we also, when we saw in studying this, when we saw that it meant finger marks of God, right away, this title for this series, Fingerprints of Yahweh, just popped in my mind. And I began to think about that. Fingerprints are something that stay with you. They stay the same the whole time you're alive, and then when you're dead. Their uniqueness and long-lasting quality make fingerprints one of the best ways to identify a person. By a person's fingerprints, we can tell where they've been, what they've touched, and by a person's fingerprints, we can also tell who that person is. So let's just go back for a minute. So we see that these lights in verse 14. And just read it again. This up to this point says, God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, let them be for signs and for seasons. So we can say that these lights were to be markers or signals. I like to say it best, they were to be finger marks of Yah. I like to say it this way, the lights were to signal to us the things that Yahweh has his fingerprints on. Now that is pretty awesome. That they shout out to us, Yahweh has been here. Or they signal to us that Yahweh is coming. Or that Yahweh is fixing to show up. That's what these signs, these lights declare, is that Yahweh is on. He's been here. He's touched this. It's an indication of him that he's had his hands on this, on whatever these things are going to point to. Now there is another word that I want to pull out of Genesis 1 and 14, and that is the word seasons. Now this word seasons is a very important word in the verse, because people think they understand seasons and their understanding is correct. They just read by this verse and move on, and by just reading by it, they miss something very important that leads to something very beautiful. And no doubt, if, like I said, if you've been in this movement for a while, this may have been one of the first scriptures that you saw and that your understanding came into. But for the majority of my life, I read through this verse, right by this verse, and probably like the majority of people, when it comes to, I never did even bother to care to see what the word signs meant, but the word seasons, I just knew right away that it meant spring, summer, fall, and winter. And that's what the seasons were, because that's what we're told. That's what we're led to understand. But in this scripture, that's not what this word means. And so I want to take a look at this word here and get a better understanding as we look at this scripture. And here again, this first video is just a springboard that's going to help us as we begin to look through the scriptures and come upon these fingerprints of Yahweh. So let's take a look at this word that is translated as seasons. It is the Hebrew word moed. It means an appointed time or place. It signifies an appointed meeting time. It is usually referring to a sacred feast or festival. The word moed is also used to distinguish those places where Yahweh's people were to focus on Yahweh and their relationship with him. This is something as we in the next couple of teachings, as we leave Genesis and move on, this last part of this definition is something I really want you to understand. This word was also used to distinguish those places where Yah's people were to focus on Yah and their relationship with him. Here again, we're talking about the fingerprints of Yahweh. And we've already seen those signs, those markers were his fingerprints that were indicators of these appointed times or these appointed places that we were to meet with him. Now, just like the word oat had a Greek equivalent, the word moed also has a Greek equivalent. Now, when I took Greek, my teacher said it wasn't important that I learn to pronounce the Greek, as much as it was, I was able to just tell what the meaning was. So I'm going to spell this word for you today. It's Heorte. Now this word is very important because we could say that this word moed could still be, or moed could still be uh, the four seasons that we're all very familiar with. But this word, its Greek equivalent, means it's used to donate a feast, a festival, a holy day. And the word that it derives from means to keep a festival or to celebrate a holy day. So even, they both kind of go together. Moed is the same thing. It's Moed is the same thing to donate a festival, a feast, an appointed time. This Moed was used to speak of the festivals of God. So let's just go back for a moment as we begin to close here with this first video, because I said that we weren't going to do these clips very long, but we will no doubt be coming back to this information again. But I want to make sure that before we go any further in this series, that you understand this verse. Because like I said, it's very easy to just read past. But if we go back with the understanding for the word signs and seasons that we have now, we can go back and look at this verse, and we could say it this way. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. Let them be for markers or signals. Let them be for fingerprints of Yah, declaring the appointed times or holy days or the appointed place to meet Yahweh. That's really what is being said in this verse in Genesis 1 and 14. And we need to get a very good understanding of that as we progress in this teaching. And like I said, maybe this was for you. This is so simple and so elementary that you're thinking this is a waste of my time to even watch this. But here again, this is made to break it down simple for someone who may just be entering into the knowledge and understanding of these things. So this is the point that we're making this series. The series is not for someone primarily that already has a good understanding and grasp of these things, and for us to give you a deep nugget, but this is a tool to maybe help reach out to those who are just becoming interested, or that Yahweh is just wakening up to these fingerprints of His, these things that He's got His fingerprints on. So just want you to remember as we continue with these, the words signs and seasons, what they are, what they mean, what this verse is saying. And this is as far as we're going, because we don't want to put too much on at one time. We want to start, like I said, from the beginning and lay in this foundation. In our next teaching, we will move on and begin to look at another scripture that is introducing to us these fingerprints of Yahweh. I want to thank you for watching, and continue to watch for the Potter's House videos, for our Sabbath services that we put on, and also for our series, Fingerprints of God. I want to say Shabbat Shalom.